The closest people often hold the sharpest blades. We reveal the shocking stories of broken trust and the incredible strength it takes to rise above the pain of betrayal. Subscribe now to witness these intense narratives and never miss a single update.
Hemina Dungs, Natalie, Daniel, Melissa, Priya, Claire, Marcus, Ryan, Donna, June, Theodore, Carla, Harriet, Weston, Phyllis, Kevin, Amber, Vanessa, Gordon, Owen, Sasha, Iris, Brooke, Loretta, Harriet, Weston, Phyllis, Kevin, Amber, Vanessa, Gordon, Owen, Sasha, Iris, Brooke, Loretta, Stephanie, Gerald, Eluz, Conrad, Renata, Sandra, Leah, Brett, Cecily, Doug, Robin, Meredith, Tim, Ha, Isuichi, Dune, Vivian, Nim, Tin, Fletcher, Shin, Hauf, Agnes, Nive, the Goan, Agnes, Nive, Furames, Kemplo, 8 Quas, Epola, Taf, Tam, Tam, Tau, Fink. Fletcher had suggested red wine. Something egged, something expensive, something he'd been saving for a special occasion. I told him champagne felt more romantic for our 7th anniversary. He smiled and said whatever I wanted. He always said whatever I wanted, right up until he didn't need to anymore. I watched him pour it himself, his back half turned to me, both flutes sitting on the kitchen island while I pretended to scroll through my phone. His hands were steady, they were always steady. That's what I had loved about him once, the way nothing rattled him, the way he moved through the world like a man who had already decided how everything would end. I knew what was in that champagne. I had known for 11 days. The glass he handed me was cold against my fingers. He raised his own and looked at me the way he used to look at me when we first started dating. Full attention, full warmth, like I was the only thing in the room. "Happy anniversary, sweetheart," he said. "To 7 more years." I smiled. I drank. And I watched him drink too. He didn't know I had switched the flutes while he was checking his phone in the hallway. He didn't know I had been building a tolerance to what he'd been putting in my evening tea for 4 months. He didn't know that the woman sitting across from him in the candlelight was not the same woman who had found his locked briefcase 6 months ago. The one he kept in the back of the closet behind his golf shoes. The one he thought I had no reason to ever touch. He thought tonight was the ending he had written. It wasn't. I met my husband at a conference in Chicago. I was 31, presenting a paper on urban water infrastructure, and he was in the back row with his sleeves rolled up and his tie loosened like he'd wandered in from somewhere more interesting. He asked me a question during the Q&A that had nothing to do with water infrastructure and everything to do with getting my attention. It worked. I was smarter than that, or I thought I was. His name was Fletcher Ames. He was 42, a civil litigation attorney, divorced once, no children. He told me the divorce was amicable. I never thought to verify that. I never thought to verify much of anything about him because he was the kind of man who made you feel foolish for looking too closely. Like suspicion was an insult to the intimacy you'd built together. We dated for 18 months. He was attentive without being suffocating, generous without being showy. He remembered small things, that I hated cilantro, that I got migraines in high humidity, that I preferred paperback books to hardcovers because I liked the way they bent. He made me feel known. That is a very specific and very dangerous thing to do to a woman who grew up feeling invisible. We got married in Vermont in October. 40 guests, a farmhouse venue, leaves turning outside the windows. My mother cried. His college roommate gave a toast that made the whole room laugh. I wore my grandmother's pearl earrings, and I remember thinking, standing at the altar, that I had finally gotten something exactly right. The first 2 years were good. Or they seemed good. I was finishing my doctorate, he was making partner, we bought a house in Ashford with a yard I immediately started filling with plants. We had a life that looked, from the outside, exactly like a life should look. The cracks were small at first. Business trips that ran longer than expected. A second phone I caught a glimpse of once and he explained away so smoothly I almost wondered if I had imagined it. A new insurance policy he suggested I sign. Just good planning, he said. You never know. The vitamins he started leaving on my nightstand. Just magnesium, he said. Good for sleep. I started having trouble sleeping anyway. I found the briefcase on a Wednesday afternoon in March. Fletcher was in Seattle for a deposition that had been rescheduled twice. I was looking for a spare phone charger and I pulled his golf bag out of the closet and there it was. A slim black case combination lock, tucked behind the clubs like it had always been there. and I had simply never been meant to see it. I don't know why I didn't put it back. Some part of me already knew, I think. You know before you know. The body understands things the mind is still negotiating. I got it open in 40 minutes. The combination was our wedding date, which told me either he was sloppy or he'd never imagined I would look. Inside, a manila folder. Inside the folder, photographs, documents, and 2 folded pages of handwritten notes in his precise attorney's handwriting. The photographs were of 3 women. Each one looked a little like me. Dark hair, professional, late 30s. The particular kind of put together that comes from working hard for a long time. Each photo had a name written on the back in pencil. Joanna, Hartford, Connecticut, 2014. Renee, Portland, Oregon, 2017. Renee, Portland, Oregon, 2017. Beth, Scottsdale, Arizona, 2020. The documents were death certificates. Accidental overdose. Cardiac event of undetermined origin. Accidental drowning. The handwritten notes were a timeline. My name was at the top, Vivian Ames. Below it, in neat columns, the date we met, the date we married, the policy number of the life insurance he'd taken out on me 18 months ago, and a projected date. 7 years. Anniversary. The room didn't spin. That's what surprised me most. I sat down on the closet floor with the folder in my hands, and everything went very, very still. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I made dinner. I watched television. When Fletcher called from Seattle at 9 o'clock, I told him I'd had a quiet day and that I missed him, and I listened to the warmth in his voice, and I thought about Joanna and Renee and Beth, and I understood for the first time what cold clarity actually felt like. That night I didn't sleep. I made a list. The next morning I called a woman named Paula Reyes, no relation to the detective, just a coincidence I'd appreciate later. Paula ran a private investigations firm out of a converted office space above a dry cleaner on Maple Street. She was 56, former law enforcement, and she had been recommended to me 3 years earlier by a colleague whose business partner had been embezzling. I'd kept her card in my desk drawer, and I had never thought I'd need it. I told her I was looking into a potential business fraud. I did not tell her it was my husband, not yet. Within 3 weeks Paula had found them. Not 3. 5. Fletcher had been married 5 times. Joanna, Renee, and Beth were dead. A woman named Carol in Minneapolis had survived only because she'd filed for divorce. Before he could act, he'd moved on quickly, written her off as a loss. The 5th woman, a nurse named Dorothy in Providence, had been hospitalized twice in the year before their divorce for symptoms that her doctors had attributed to an undiagnosed autoimmune condition. She was fine now. She had no idea. I sat with Paula in her office and she laid out the files and she asked me, carefully, if I was safe. I told her I was handling it. She looked at me for a long moment and then she said, I've seen women handle things and I've seen women think they're handling things. Make sure you know which one you're doing. I knew which one I was doing. I went to the police first. I want to say that plainly because it matters. I took everything I had, the photographs, the policy documents, Paula's preliminary report, to the Ashford Police Department on a Tuesday morning, and I sat across from a detective named Garza, and I told him my husband was a serial killer. I used those exact words. Detective Garza listened carefully, and then he explained that the deaths had occurred in different jurisdictions, that the cases were closed, that a private investigator's report and some circumstantial documents were not sufficient to reopen them, and that if I felt I was in danger I should consider a domestic violence resource. He gave me a pamphlet. I left with the pamphlet and I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time. That was the day I stopped waiting for someone else to fix it. My neighbor Agnes is 81 years old, and she has been growing things since before I was born. Her yard is a controlled wilderness, dahlias and foxglove and monkshood and things I couldn't name, all thriving under her careful hands. She had been trying to get me interested in her garden for years. 3 months after I found the briefcase, I finally knocked on her door and asked if she would teach me. Agnes was delighted. We spent Saturday afternoons together. She talked about soil composition and drainage and the particular stubbornness of certain roots. I took notes. I asked questions. I was a very attentive student. What I was actually studying had less to do with growing things and more to do with what certain plants could do when they were prepared correctly, what combinations were undetectable, what symptoms they produced, what a medical examiner would see and what they would never think to look for. Agnes never suspected anything. She thought she was teaching me a hobby. She was teaching me something else entirely. I also began taking small, measured amounts of a compound I found instructions for through channels I accessed carefully, from a device I'd bought with cash. I kept a log. The first few weeks were unpleasant. I had headaches and my hands would shake in the evenings, and I had to be very careful to perform normalcy for Fletcher, who watched me with the solicitous attention of a man monitoring his investment. "You look tired," he'd say. "Are you taking the magnesium I left for you?" "I am," I tell him. "I don't know why I'm still not sleeping well." He'd look concerned. He was very good at looking concerned. I spent those 6 months building two things simultaneously, my immunity and my case. The case was careful and thorough. I had copies made of every document from the briefcase, which I distributed to 3 locations: a safe deposit box at a bank in a neighboring town opened under my maiden name, a locked drawer at Paula's office, and a sealed envelope with my divorce attorney, a woman named Len who I retained on the pretense of updating my estate planning and who I told, in a sealed letter to be opened only in the event of my death or disappearance, exactly what I knew about Fletcher Ames. I also created what I thought of as the counter-narrative. Fletcher had spent months documenting my declining health, concerned emails to my doctor about my forgetfulness, notes to his own files about my fatigue, text messages to my sister asking if she'd noticed any changes in me. He was building the story of a woman who had been unwell for some time before her sudden death. I let him build it, and simultaneously I was building a different story. Video messages sent to a secure cloud account, dated and time-stamped, of me speaking clearly and lucidly about our marriage, our finances, his travel schedule. Letters to friends referencing my good health and my happiness. A paper trail of a woman who was fine, who was thriving, who had absolutely no reason to suddenly die on her wedding anniversary. I also, 3 months before our anniversary, quietly changed my will. Everything to my sister. I removed Fletcher without telling him. The night of our anniversary, he made reservations at Harlow's, the restaurant where we'd had our first date, which he thought was romantic and which I recognized as symbolism. He liked symmetry. I had learned that about him. I told him I wanted to stay in, cook together, open something special, just the two of us. He paused for just a moment, recalibrating, I imagine, and then he said that sounded perfect. He picked up a bottle of champagne on his way home from the office. I watched him set it on the counter. I watched him open it himself, his back half turned. What he didn't know was that I had been in the kitchen for an hour before he arrived. We cooked together, pasta, because it was what we'd eaten on our second date, and he remembered that and made a small production of it. He was in a good mood. He was charming and warm and funny, and I watched him the way you watch a performance when you already know the ending, with a kind of detached appreciation for the craft. We sat down to eat. He poured the champagne. He handed me my glass. He raised his and looked at me. 7 years, he said, and many more. I touched my glass to his. I drank, he drank. I watched. It started about 40 minutes later. He set down his fork and pressed 2 fingers to his temple. "I have a headache," he said. "I know," I said. He looked at me. "The headache," he said. "I know," I said. He looked at me. "The headache isn't from the champagne," I told him. Or not only from the champagne. Something moved across his face. Not quite recognition yet, but the beginning of it. "What are you talking about?" I got up and cleared my plate. I did it slowly, calmly, because I had rehearsed this moment so many times in my head that it felt almost ordinary. When I came back to the table, I set a folder in front of him. He looked down at it and then up at me, and I watched the color drain out of his face in a way that was genuinely satisfying. "Joanna Hartford," I said. "Renee Portland. Beth Scottsdale. Carol Minneapolis. Dorothy Providence. Beth Scottsdale. Carol Minneapolis. Dorothy Providence." He said nothing. His jaw was working, but nothing came out. "You forgot about Dorothy," I said. "She's alive. She has records. She was very helpful." His hand went to the table to steady himself. How much did he table to steady himself? Enough, I said. "I've been building a tolerance for 4 months. Whatever you put in the champagne, I've been taking small amounts of it since February. I found your private supply in March. You really shouldn't keep things like that in a home office that your wife has access to." He pushed back from the table. "I need to Sit down, I said. There's nowhere to go. He sat, whether from choice or because his legs were no longer fully cooperating. I wasn't sure. Probably some of both. His face had gone gray and there was sweat at his temples, and he was looking at me like I was something he had fundamentally miscalculated, which I was. Why? He said. Not why did I do this to you. I could see he understood that. He meant why hadn't I just left? Why hadn't I just run? Why had I done it this way? Because leaving wasn't enough, I told him. Because Joanna didn't get to leave. Because Beth didn't get to leave. Because you would have found another woman in another city and done it again, and the detective in Ashford would have given her a pamphlet too. His breathing was labored now. His head dropped forward slightly. There's a USB drive in your jacket pocket, I said. I put it there when I hung up your coat. It has everything, the documents from your briefcase, Paula's full report, the insurance policies, the toxicology records from Joanna and Renee and Beth's cases, with annotations from an independent lab, and Dorothy's medical records, which she gave me willingly once I explained who I was. It also has a recording of this conversation. He lifted his head. His eyes were glassy but still focused, still trying. You'll be charged, he said. Whatever you've done to me. I called 911 4 minutes ago, I said, from the landline in the kitchen while you thought I was clearing the plates. I told them my husband had collapsed and I was frightened. By my estimation, the ambulance is about 6 minutes away. Understanding moved through him slowly, like something heavy sinking. You're going to survive this, I told him. The dose I used is serious but not fatal. I spent a long time on the dosage, actually. I wanted you conscious for this conversation. And I wanted you alive for what comes next. Whatever you plan to say about the champagne, whatever story you built about my declining health, the recording will clarify the timeline. And the USB drive will do the rest. He opened his mouth, closed it. I sat back down across from him. I wanted him to look at me. I wanted him to see in my face that the woman he had chosen had not been the woman he thought she was, and that this was a miscalculation he would spend a long time thinking about. You taught me something, I said. You taught me that preparation is everything, that patience matters more than almost anything else, that if you want an outcome badly enough, you work toward it quietly and carefully and you don't stop. You were right about all of that. You were just wrong about who was actually paying attention. The paramedics arrived at 9:47. I was standing on the front steps when they pulled up, and I was crying, and I told them that my husband had collapsed at dinner and I didn't know what was wrong and I was so frightened, and they were very kind to me. The investigation took 4 months. It was, as these things go, fairly clean. Detective Garza came to see me twice, once in the immediate aftermath, and once 6 weeks later when the cases in Hartford and Portland and Scottsdale had been formally reopened. The second time he came, he sat across from my kitchen table with his notepad, and he was quieter than the first time. He didn't offer me a pamphlet. The USB drive was found in Fletcher's jacket pocket, exactly where I had placed it. His phone, which I had also accessed before his arrival that evening, contained a detailed note in his drafts folder, something between a contingency plan and a confession, addressed to no one. The kind of document a careful man writes to manage his own guilt and then never sends. It was remarkably detailed. It was, from a prosecutorial standpoint, extraordinarily useful. Fletcher pled guilty to 3 counts. Dorothy's case was complicated by the statute of limitations, but her records were entered into evidence. His attorney, not his firm, obviously, he'd been disbarred by then, tried to argue duress on the night of the anniversary dinner, which didn't go particularly far given the recordings and the documents and the testimony of Paula Reyes, who turned out to be an excellent witness. I testified once. I wore the same pearl earrings I'd worn at our wedding. I figured someone might as well get use out of them. I live in a smaller house now, in a town I won't name here, about 2 hours from Ashford. The yard is bigger than my last one, and I've spent the past year filling it with things I actually want to grow. Tomatoes, lavender, a fig tree that I have been warned is optimistic for the climate but which I intend to prove wrong. Agnes sends me seeds sometimes. I don't think she knows exactly what happened, though she's sharp enough that she probably knows more than she lets on. Her notes are short and warm, and she always includes growing instructions as though I might have forgotten, which I find charming. Joanna's sister found me through the case coverage. We talked on the phone for a long time. She asked me questions I tried to answer honestly, including some I didn't have good answers to. There's a group now. Small, quiet, not the kind of thing you'd find if you weren't looking for it. made up mostly of families who lost someone to men like Fletcher. I attend when I can. I don't always know what to say. Mostly I just show up, which someone in the group told me is actually the most important thing you can do. I haven't dated. I don't have a strong feeling about whether I will. Some mornings I make coffee and sit in the yard before the day starts, and everything is very quiet, and I think that quiet is, for now, exactly what I wanted. I still keep a notebook. Old habit. I still notice things, the way a person's attention sharpens when they think they're not being watched, the small inconsistencies that accumulate into patterns over time. I don't know if that vigilance will ever fully soften, and I'm no longer sure I want it to. Fletcher used to say I was too trusting. He said it like it was a flaw he was generously overlooking. He was right that I trusted him. He was wrong about what that cost him. Some lessons don't come with a choice about whether you learn them. You just decide what you do with what you know. People ask me sometimes, not directly, but in the careful way people ask things they're not sure they're allowed to ask, whether I regret any of it, whether I wish I had done something differently, whether I feel guilty. I think about that question more honestly than most people probably expect me to. Here's what I've come to understand. What happened to me and Fletcher was not random. It was not bad luck. It was the result of choices. His, accumulated over years, and eventually mine. Every action he took had a consequence he didn't account for, and the consequence he missed was me. Not the version of me he thought he'd married, but the version of me that existed underneath. The one who paid attention, who adapted, who refused to be the ending he had written. That's the part that took me the longest to make peace with. I spent a long time thinking that what I did was something separate from who I am. Some emergency self I summoned once and then put away. But I don't think that's true anymore. The patience I developed during those 6 months, the careful documentation, the quiet preparation, the discipline of performing normalcy while building something underneath it. Those weren't new skills. They were things that had always been in me. I just had never needed them at that level before. Fletcher didn't create that capacity in me. He just forced me to find it. And that matters, I think, because the story isn't really about him. It's about what a person can do when they decide to think clearly in a moment that is designed to make you panic. When Fletcher put those files in that briefcase, he was counting on a specific response from me. Fear, paralysis, grief, maybe flight. He had engineered the whole situation around a woman who would not think strategically under pressure. He was wrong about that, and his wrongness was the thing that undid him. I think about Joanna and Renee and Beth a lot. I think about the fact that they were not less intelligent than me, not less capable, not less deserving of survival. They just didn't have the specific sequence of circumstances that gave me time to prepare. That's it. That's the whole difference. And sitting with that is humbling in a way that keeps me honest. I didn't survive because I was smarter or stronger. I survived because I had 6 months and a neighbor with a garden and a private investigator who kept her card in a desk drawer. Luck and preparation together, not either one alone. What I've tried to carry forward from all of it is this: the moment you decide to pay attention is the moment the situation starts to shift. Not dramatically, not immediately, but it shifts. Agnes used to say that the difference between a plant that thrives and one that doesn't is rarely about the plant itself. It's about whether anyone is paying close enough attention to what it actually needs. I think about that more than I expected to. Fletcher thought he understood me. He thought he had read me completely. What he missed was that the person he had studied so carefully for 7 years had been quietly studying him back, and that one of us had been taking notes for very different reasons. Intelligence without integrity is just a more efficient way to cause harm. What he never had, and what I hope I still have, is the ability to use what I know in service of something honest. I'm still learning what that looks like. I'm still figuring out what kind of person I am on the other side of all of it. But I'm here, and I'm asking the question, and some days that feels like enough.